My whole vision of my life was about living this idealized situation. I'm living in New York City, working in an ad agency, and we had just had our first baby. But then these policemen said, there's been an accident. My wife fell onto the subway tracks. 2 or 3 cars rolled over her and her spinal cord was damaged. I would just live in this fear and worry and anxiety. And one day I had this impulse to draw, and somehow this experience made me feel free of a lot of those fears. And I started to realize I had so many things in my life that were rich and beautiful. And over time, one thing has led to another, and suddenly I was the CEO of a company, and I ended up kind of by accident starting a business. And I thought, whoa, we just made $180,000. This is crazy. I'm Danny Gregory. I'm an artist, I'm an author, I'm a teacher, and I'm a creator. When I was a kid, I think the thing that I was really captivated by that had kind of a magical quality was to make a little book. I really wanted to be an author, but I had no idea what one did to do that. I started my career in advertising basically because I needed a job. You could make up stories, you could write things that had pictures, you could make videos, and I thought this is actually a pretty cool business. At a certain point in my early 30s, I kind of had my life worked out, it seemed. I'm living in New York City. We had a nice apartment. Patty was working as a fashion stylist, and we had just had our first baby who was 9 months old, and everything in our life seemed set. It was early June in New York, and I was working on a really big advertising campaign. And these policemen came to this photo studio and asked to talk to me. And they said, there's been an accident. We need you to come with us. What had happened was that earlier that morning, Patty had left Jack with a babysitter, and she had gone down to the subway to take the train up to this photo shoot that she was doing. And somehow she fell onto the subway tracks just as the number 9 train rolled into the Christopher Street station, and it rolled over her. And then we discovered after they started doing x-rays and so forth that her spinal cord was damaged and that she would basically never walk again. In an instant, our life had completely changed. But over time, she got more and more sort of used to this new way of being. She was able to figure out how to look after a baby even though she was disabled. Bit by bit, life returned to a new kind of normal. But for me, things were pretty different because my whole vision of my life was about living this idealized situation that turned out not to be really that realistic. I hadn't in any way prepared for the deck to be reshuffled. Now suddenly everything was unpredictable. That was really my problem, was that I was conceiving of a future that I didn't really know, and I wasn't living in the here and now. I would just live in this black kind of bubble of fear and worry and anxiety. And one day I had this impulse. I've never really been able to know where it came from, but I had this impulse to go into my bathroom and to draw the contents of my medicine cabinet. A bottle of Advil next to a tube of toothpaste, and I just worked my way down the thing. And I hadn't really drawn since I was in high school, but somehow this experience of doing this drawing made me feel relaxed, free of a lot of those fears, and it seemed to decompress all that anxiety. So I started to carry a sketchbook around with me in my bag on the way to work. I would draw on the subway or buildings that I passed, or I would draw my sandwich that I was eating at lunch, just kind of ordinary things. It wasn't meant to be great art. It was meant to go back into that meditative flow state that seemed to be really liberating. When I was in high school and I made art, it was for the end result. What would look cool? What would it be like when it was finished? What would people say about it? I was always thinking about the after. When I started drawing again in my mid-30s, I didn't really care about the finished product. I could take that drawing of the medicine cabinet and toss it in the trash. What mattered was the process of doing it. That was really the pleasure, and the satisfaction came from that. But I think when I started to draw, I started to realize that I had so many things in my life that were rich and beautiful. I always loved technology, and when the internet first started to grow up like little sprouts, I was all over it. I was out there looking for information about disability because I wanted to know about wheelchairs. I wanted to know about health issues. I wanted to hear stories of other people who had led this life. And I started to put together a list of links. And then I thought these links might be useful to other people. And so I built my first website. But even more interestingly, I was able to set up a comments section. And I said, if you have any resources you'd like to share, put them in the comments and we'll add them to these links. Well, people didn't just share their links, they also shared their stories. In 2010, I was at work and 2 policemen came to my office. And suddenly I was living the same experience that I'd had 15 or so years before. They told me that Patty had passed away. Now I had seen her 2 hours before that. I'd left her at work. We had talked about what we were planning to have for dinner. And when I got home, I discovered we had some window boxes and a little patio with flowers on it. And we had set up a hose so that she could water the plants. And she apparently was leaning out the window to water the plants, lost her balance, and slid out the window and fell 8 floors. It was insane. I mean, it was horrible, it was shocking, and everything was destroyed all over again. When Patty had her first accident, I still had her. She was still there. We did it together. We figured it out together what we were going to do. But when she died, I was on my own with my son, who was 15 at the time. Before Patty's accident, I was drawing in black and white. After she died, of course, for a few weeks, I didn't make any art at all. But then Jack and I went away on a little trip, and we went to Boston, and I started to draw on that trip. And suddenly, I wanted to draw in the brightest colors. Patty loved intense colors, so maybe that's where it came from. And it was weird because I was going through this grieving process, but I was expressing it in these intense colors. For decades, it had people say to me, why are you still in advertising? Why aren't you doing this other thing that you do? And I always thought, well, because advertising is my job and art is not my job. It took a long time to have the nerve to do it, honestly. And one day I left and I had no idea what I was going to do when I quit. And I had no idea where that would lead to. So we moved to Los Angeles, and then I wrote a book there called Art Before Breakfast. And I ended up, kind of by accident, starting a business. I think when we actually launched it, we had 1,800 people signed up for it at $99 each. And I thought, whoa, we just made $180,000. This is crazy. And over time, we ended up doing probably 25 courses altogether. And one thing has led to another, and the business has grown richer and deeper. Suddenly, I was the CEO of a company. It was bizarre. For a long time, close to 20 years, I had a blog. But the more I did work on Sketchbook School, the less I was really blogging. I tried microblogging on Instagram. I had tried various places, and I always had this kind of desire to write stuff. I'm a writer, but I didn't have a regular audience. And then one day a friend actually suggested maybe it would be interesting for me to start to use email as my way of sending it out. And so I started looking for platforms. And then I started noticing that some of the newsletters that I subscribed to were also on ConvertKit. I made this transition where I moved a lot of subscribers from another platform into ConvertKit. And then eventually, after a few months of doing it, I thought I want to create a paid newsletter. I wasn't really doing it for the revenue so much at the beginning. I was just doing it because I wanted to create a different level of engagement with certain readers. Like, I wanted to find who were the readers who weren't just getting this because it was free, but who were really deeply engaged and wanted to support what I was doing. So I started creating a second newsletter called Studio Notebook, in which I just wrote about the creative process. The emails that people write to me in response to my paid newsletter, they're writing to me as if they really know me on a different level. They're not just saying, I liked it, although they do that. But a lot of times they'll tell me a story from their own experience. What I love about writing my newsletter is the back and forth with my readers. It's not like getting likes on social media. It is a conversation. With a newsletter, it's a different relationship because it's one-to-one. They're not seeing what other people have said. And I design my newsletters to feel like an email. I'm writing to you, and here's what I thought you might like. And so when you write back to me, you're just replying to an email. That's a really different engagement than a public social media platform. I learn a lot about what people like, what they're interested in, what they're wrestling with, how I can help them, insights that they have into my work. A lot of readers had said to me, I save every one of your essays. I print them out, put them in a notebook, and I collect them. Is there any way that you would ever write a book about this stuff? I would rather have a book. And so I thought, okay, well, that's not that hard to do. And I just said to people, fine, if you want the book, here it is. And I've been selling the ebook through ConvertKit. It took me, I don't know, half an hour to get the whole thing set up and to embed it in my template so that it's an easy link for people to find. And it just sort of runs on automatic. It makes me want to write more books. Financially, my paid newsletter has been a good business. It's been in mid to high 5 figures. But I think my main impetus has always been to just create a more meaningful relationship. And I feel like in general, if people pay something, they think it has more value and they feel more connected to it. And that's what I love about ConvertKit is it really became a completely self-sustaining business. There's no question that it can be. I think I've seen my creativity and my art become more and more central to my life. And because of that, I feel a lot less fearful. I feel a lot less held back and blocked. I feel like I can do all kinds of things without permission. For many years in advertising, I ultimately was working for a boss. I was working for a client, I was working on a product. There were a lot of limitations to my creativity, and anything outside of that felt like an indulgence, it felt like a hobby. Now I feel like art is what my life is all about. Art, creativity, expression is part of my business, it's part of my job, it's part of what I do when I have downtime. I live a free, creative, artistic life now that I don't think I ever thought I could do. I didn't think that I could sit down and just write something and publish it. That sense of liberation and no need to ask for permission, that's something that's going to carry me for the rest of my life. So it's really a very different setup than working towards retirement or whatever. Now I define what my life is going to be like.